The evening was calm, the streets glistening with the sheen of recent rain, and I had arrived earlier than planned. My stomach churned with unease as I parked my car and saw her vehicle parked in the driveway. The familiarity of the car made my heart skip a beat. I hadn't expected anyone else to be there. I stepped closer, keeping my distance, and peered through the slightly tinted window. My husband was inside, leaning close to the other woman. The words that drifted from his lips were clear, unmistakable, and cutting. "You're so tight." My entire body froze. The betrayal hit me like a tidal wave. I felt anger, shock, and a surge of adrenaline all at once. My mind raced, trying to process what I had just witnessed. How long had this been going on? How could he have done this behind my back, pretending everything was normal between us? I took a deep breath, forcing my panic to subside. Acting impulsively now would mean losing control, and I could not allow that. I needed a plan, something solid. I couldn't just confront them blindly. I had to gather proof, evidence that could protect me and expose their deception fully. Pulling out my phone, I activated the hidden camera I had purchased weeks ago, anticipating that something suspicious might occur. It was a precaution that now seemed more necessary than ever. Every gesture, every word, every whisper would be documented. This time, I would not be blind to betrayal. I stepped back into the shadows, my hands trembling, but my resolve firm. I watched them for what felt like hours, carefully noting every detail. The way he smiled, the way she leaned in, the subtle touches, each one a piece of the puzzle. I would not allow my emotions to cloud my judgment. Observation was my weapon. Later that night, as I reviewed the footage, the reality of the situation became undeniable. There was no misunderstanding. There was no innocent explanation. He had been unfaithful, deceitful, and manipulative. My anger simmered, but I refused to act hastily. Instead, I began to formulate a strategy. The coming days would be crucial. I had to collect corroborating evidence, trace financial records, and identify witnesses. Every phone call, every secret meeting, every transaction could provide the ammunition I needed. I knew that exposure would be far more effective than confrontation alone. By the end of the night, I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. Fear of what the coming days would reveal, but exhilaration at the clarity I now possessed. For the first time in months, I had a sense of control. Betrayal had been revealed, and with it, the opportunity for justice. I whispered to myself, I will not be silent. I will not be powerless. I will ensure the truth comes to light, and I will rise stronger than ever. The next morning, I awoke with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. Betrayal can either shatter you or sharpen you, and I had chosen the latter. I needed to see the full extent of his deceit, and I needed proof, not just for confrontation, but to reclaim the control he thought he had taken from me. I began by retracing his steps over the past months. Emails, bank statements, social media activity, all carefully documented. Each suspicious message, each unusual purchase, each unexplained meeting was a thread, and I intended to weave them into a narrative so undeniable that even he could not refute it. At work, I stayed focused but observant. I noticed subtle signs he had left behind, small traces of his dishonesty, a lunch receipt at a restaurant he claimed never to visit, vague comments from colleagues hinting at his secret excursions, and mysterious phone calls he thought I wouldn't notice. I logged everything meticulously. Meanwhile, the hidden camera footage from the previous evening replayed in my mind. His expressions, the way he leaned in close to her, the whispered words. They were small, but powerful details. I compiled screenshots, timestamps, and even recorded audio snippets. Every whisper, every smirk became undeniable evidence. I also reached out discreetly to a friend of the other woman. Carefully, subtly, I confirmed what I had suspected. They were involved, and it wasn't just casual flirting. This wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a pattern, a betrayal that cut deep. Days passed, and I continued observing. I attended events where he thought I wouldn't be present. I monitored his interactions, noting every glance, every hushed conversation. Each moment reinforced the truth I had already suspected. He had underestimated me, assuming my silence meant ignorance. He was wrong. I was anything but ignorant. Every night I organized the evidence. It wasn't enough to just know the truth. I needed it documented and undeniable. Emails were printed, messages archived, videos edited. I created a digital and physical record of everything. By the end of the week, I had an unassailable collection. But it wasn't just about exposing him publicly. I had to understand my own emotions first. Anger, hurt, and fear threatened to cloud my judgment. I spent quiet moments reflecting, meditating, and planning. Every action I would take needed precision, focus, and control. There would be no outburst, no rash decisions. I wanted strategy, not chaos. As I moved through the days, I noticed subtle cracks in his behavior. He became cautious, perhaps sensing my awareness. He tried to cover his tracks, but my preparation ensured nothing went unnoticed. Every secret was gradually coming to light. By the end of the week, I was ready. I had all the evidence, all the corroboration, and all the support I needed. The stage was set for the confrontation I had been planning silently for days. He believed he could continue his deception unchecked, but I had the cards in my hand, and it was time to play them. That evening, I sat down with the complete evidence. A calm smile formed on my lips. Every document, every video snippet, every corroborating testimony, each was a piece of the puzzle. I wasn't preparing for revenge and anger. I was preparing for justice in full clarity. The next step was public. I needed to show him and everyone around him the truth. Tonight, at the dinner gathering he had planned, would be the moment. The room would fill with witnesses, friends, and colleagues, all unaware of the revelation that was about to unfold. As I packed my bag with the camera, printed evidence, and supporting documents, a sense of empowerment washed over me. For the first time in weeks, I felt a surge of control. He had underestimated me, thinking my silence meant submission. He was wrong, very wrong, I whispered to myself. Tonight the truth will speak. Tonight the lies will crumble, and I will walk out unbroken, stronger and victorious. The following days became a delicate dance of observation and patience. I positioned myself strategically, attending the same gatherings, stopping by places I knew he would be, all while remaining unnoticed. He laughed, joked, and whispered with her, completely unaware that I was watching, taking note and planning every next move. Every interaction, every glance, every subtle touch was documented. I noticed the way he slightly adjusted his tone when she was near, the little smirks he didn't think I would see, the way she laughed too loudly at his jokes. Every detail painted the full picture of their ongoing affair. But I didn't just watch, I analyzed. I began connecting the dots between secret meetings, late-night calls, and unaccounted expenses. Each hidden action became a thread in the web of deceit. My mind worked like a camera lens, zooming in on every detail, capturing it, storing it, and preparing it for the moment when all of this would be revealed. It wasn't enough to know the truth. I needed it undeniable. I cross-referenced receipts, timestamps, and messages, confirming every suspicion. I contacted mutual acquaintances discreetly, gathering independent verification without raising alarms. This wasn't just about catching him in the act. It was about building a case so comprehensive that no one could question its authenticity. At night, I reviewed the recordings again and again. His whisper, "You're so tight," replayed in my mind, fueling my determination. The hurt threatened to spill over, but I kept it under control. Anger could be destructive if misdirected. Strategy, however, could be lethal in its effectiveness. My goal was not vengeance. It was exposure, accountability, and reclamation of my power. I began preparing a digital and physical dossier of the evidence. Videos, screenshots, transcripts, bank statements, all meticulously organized. Each piece of proof was numbered, categorized, and cross-referenced. By the time I was done, the weight of betrayal had been transformed into a tangible tool of empowerment. Alongside preparation, I rehearsed my demeanor. I would not walk into the confrontation angry or frantic. Calmness would amplify the impact of the revelation. I envisioned the dinner party, the guests, the room filled with unsuspecting witnesses. I imagined the moment I would present the evidence, their shock, and the silence that would follow. He was arrogant, careless, and believed he could continue his affair unnoticed. That overconfidence would be his undoing. I made sure every piece of evidence was irrefutable, every witness aligned, and every detail precise. He had underestimated me, and that mistake would be monumental. By midweek, I had everything in place. I reviewed the evidence one final time, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and relief. I knew exactly how the confrontation would unfold, how he would react, and how the room would respond. I had turned my hurt into focus, my anger into strategy, and my betrayal into undeniable truth. I reached out to a trusted friend, explaining the plan without revealing every detail. Their role was simple: discreetly support me, confirm the authenticity of the evidence, and ensure no one could dispute the timeline or facts. With their help, I was confident that the exposure would be complete, devastating, and just. Finally, the night of the gathering arrived. Elena, calm, composed, and resolute, entered the venue, carrying the dossier, the hidden camera, and the evidence that would alter everything. The room hummed with casual chatter, oblivious to the storm that had quietly arrived with her. Her husband greeted her with a confident smile, utterly unaware of the meticulous plan she had executed. The other woman glanced curiously, sensing only a faint change in Elena's demeanor, but not understanding the magnitude of it. This was it, the moment where patience, observation, and strategic planning would meet action. Elena's heart was steady, her mind razor-sharp, and her purpose unshakable. Tonight, the truth would no longer hide in shadows. Tonight, the lies would crumble, and Elena would emerge stronger, empowered, and in full control. The dinner hall was filled with laughter and the soft clinking of glasses, a picture of normalcy. But beneath that cheerful facade, a storm was waiting. Elena walked in, composed, carrying her dossier, her hidden camera, and every piece of evidence she had meticulously gathered. Her steps were deliberate, calm, each heel clicking softly against the polished floor like a drumbeat announcing an impending reckoning. Her husband looked up and greeted her with a smug smile, completely unaware of the tempest she brought with her. The other woman, confident yet slightly uneasy, glanced at Elena, sensing only a faint tension, but not comprehending the full magnitude of what was about to unfold. Elena took a deep breath and approached the main table. All eyes naturally followed her. The casual chatter dimmed, curiosity and confusion replacing the laughter. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her calmness alone commanded attention. "I think it's time everyone sees the truth," Elena said, her voice steady, clear, and resonant. The room fell silent. Conversations halted. Glasses were left midair as guests turned toward her, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Her husband's smirk faltered. The confident, arrogant man who believed himself untouchable suddenly looked unsure. "Why, what?" he began, but Elena raised a hand, cutting him off. "I've documented everything," she continued, distributing copies of emails, messages, bank statements, and screenshots to key witnesses in the room. Photos, video stills, and transcripts accompanied them, each piece a nail in the coffin of his deception. Whispers spread across the hall. The other woman's face drained of color as she realized the documents implicated her as well. She attempted to protest, but Elena's calm authority silenced her. "These are facts. Every word, every action, every secret meeting, captured and verified," Elena said, her gaze unwavering. Gasps echoed through the room. Colleagues, friends, and family members read the evidence, disbelief spreading like wildfire. The man who had thought he could manipulate and deceive had been exposed completely. "Daniel," Elena said, turning to him, "you violated my trust, cheated, and thought your secrets would remain hidden. But you underestimated me, and now everyone sees what you are." His face went pale, words failed him. The arrogance he had worn like armor crumbled under the weight of undeniable truth. "I trusted you," Elena said, her voice soft but firm. "I believed in us, in honesty, in loyalty. And you betrayed it. You betrayed me." The other woman attempted to interject. "This is ridiculous. You can't—" "You were part of this deception," Elena interrupted. "And now you're equally accountable." Her calmness amplified the impact of her words. There was no anger, only truth, and it struck harder than any yell could. Daniel stumbled back, his jaw tight, eyes wide. His earlier confidence evaporated. Every lie, every secret, every calculated deception was now exposed to the world. Elena paused, allowing the silence to sink in. Every guest in the room was absorbing the gravity of the situation. The hidden whispers, the subtle glances, the secret meetings, all laid bare. "I didn't come here to argue or beg," Elena said, her voice steady. "I came to show the truth, and the truth is always stronger than lies." She then dropped the dossier onto the table in front of Daniel. The sound of the papers hitting the polished surface echoed through the hall, a symbolic punctuation mark to her revelation. "You thought you could continue this deception without consequence," Elena said, stepping closer. But actions have repercussions. Betrayal has consequences. And now justice is here. The room erupted with whispers, shocked murmurs, and incredulous glances. The man who had believed he controlled the narrative now had none. The other woman shrank into the background, powerless in the face of undeniable proof. Elena's calm, collected demeanor contrasted sharply with the chaos her revelation had caused. She had not shouted, not lost her composure, yet her presence and evidence carried more weight than anger ever could. "Remember this moment," she said softly, her gaze fixed on Daniel. "This is the price of deceit, and this is what happens when you underestimate someone who knows your entire world." She turned and walked out of the hall, her head held high. The whispers followed her. The shock lingered, and the consequences of her husband's betrayal had finally arrived. The confrontation was over, but the fallout, the consequences, and the empowerment it brought were just beginning. Elena had reclaimed her strength, her dignity, and her life, and those who had doubted her would never forget it. The room erupted into whispers, murmurs, and incredulous stares. Guests who had once laughed and chatted now froze, eyes darting between Daniel, the other woman, and Elena as the truth sank in. The once confident man, who had strutted through life with arrogance, now looked like a child caught in a storm. Daniel's face drained of color. This isn't true," he stammered, his voice trembling. But the documents, videos, and corroborated evidence were undeniable. Every guest had proof in their hands. There was no denying it, no twisting it to his favor. The other woman, once smug and composed, now shrank back, realizing that her involvement was equally exposed. Her attempts to argue, to excuse herself, were drowned out by the gravity of the proof. I didn't know," she faltered, but Elena's calm gaze cut through her excuses. "This isn't about anger or revenge," Elena said, addressing the room. "It's about truth, accountability, and integrity. Everyone here deserves to know what was happening behind closed doors." Gasps and whispers spread like wildfire. Friends, colleagues, and family members were stunned. Those who had once admired Daniel now questioned him. His boss, seated at the head of the table, narrowed his eyes and whispered, "Is this true?" Daniel shook his head violently. "No, you don't understand," but no one wanted to hear his explanations. The weight of evidence was overwhelming. Elena had done more than expose a betrayal. She had dismantled the carefully constructed facade he had relied on for so long. A few guests looked at Elena with admiration, some with envy, and others simply in awe. She had maintained composure while orchestrating a revelation so precise that it left no room for denial. Every calculated move, every piece of evidence, every observation she had made had culminated in this moment. The other woman tried again to protest. "It's not all true." Elena stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Everything here is verified, documented, and undeniable. You were complicit, and now everyone can see it." Daniel slumped into his chair, defeated. He had believed he could continue his affair, manipulate finances, and control perceptions, but the evidence was irrefutable. His reputation, carefully built over years, had begun to crumble in minutes. Some guests approached Elena privately, whispering congratulations and support. Others stared in disbelief, unable to process the level of deception and the precision with which Elena had revealed it. The room felt charged with tension, shock, and the undeniable sense that power had shifted entirely. Meanwhile, legal implications began to surface. Elena's evidence not only exposed betrayal, but also highlighted financial misconduct. Misuse of marital funds, hidden accounts, and secret expenditures were now clear. Anyone involved could face accountability, and Elena had ensured that the proof was thorough and unassailable. Elena didn't gloat, she didn't need to. The chaos she had orchestrated was complete, and the impact spoke for itself. Her husband and the other woman were left facing the consequences of their actions, publicly exposed and humiliated. By the end of the evening, the aftermath was undeniable. Friends and family distanced themselves from Daniel. Colleagues questioned his integrity, and the other woman found herself socially isolated. Elena, on the other hand, walked away with her dignity intact, her composure unshaken, and a sense of empowerment that came from reclaiming control over her life. As she left the hall, Elena reflected on the events. The confrontation had been precise, calculated, and deliberate. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, exposure, and reclaiming her power. She had turned betrayal into strategy, deception into evidence, and humiliation into empowerment. The fallout would continue for days, weeks, and even months. Daniel's career, finances, and relationships were now under scrutiny. The other woman's reputation was also tarnished. Elena, meanwhile, had emerged as the unshakable force in this narrative. She had not only exposed betrayal, but had also demonstrated the strength, intelligence, and resilience required to turn a devastating situation into a story of empowerment. As she stepped into the night, the air felt fresher, lighter. The city lights shimmered, reflecting her sense of accomplishment and liberation. The storm had passed, but Elena knew that the aftermath would continue to unfold. And she was ready for it. The morning after the confrontation, the aftermath of Elena's revelation had begun to ripple through every corner of their lives. Daniel's phone rang constantly, with lawyers, colleagues, and friends calling to verify the shocking evidence. The other woman's social circles had shrunk overnight. Gossip and judgment had caught up with her as swiftly as Elena had planned. Elena, however, moved through the day with calm confidence. She had anticipated the chaos, prepared for the scrutiny, and now reveled in the clarity that came with resolution. The storm had passed, leaving her in control of her life, her finances, and her dignity. The legal consequences were swift. Lawyers representing Elena reached out to address the misuse of funds, secret accounts, and breaches of marital agreements. Daniel's attempts to contest the evidence were futile. Every claim he made was countered with meticulously organized proof. Within weeks, Elena had reclaimed her assets, received restitution, and ensured that Daniel could no longer manipulate her life. Beyond finances, Elena's personal empowerment was profound. She had faced betrayal, deception, and humiliation, yet she had transformed those experiences into strategy and action. Her intelligence, patience, and resilience had turned what could have been her lowest point into a story of triumph. Friends and family reached out to offer support, admiration, and respect. Elena's reputation as a strong, strategic, and empowered woman had grown exponentially. She spent time reflecting on the lessons learned. Trust was precious, but vigilance and self-respect were even more vital. Deception thrives in silence, but truth flourishes when courage meets strategy. Elena had demonstrated that even in the face of deep betrayal, one could reclaim agency, dignity, and power through careful planning and unwavering resolve. Daniel's life had been forever altered. Professionally, colleagues questioned his integrity. Personally, he had lost the respect of friends and family. The other woman, though not legally culpable in every aspect, faced social ostracization and public judgment. Elena had exposed them both, not out of vengeance, but as an act of clarity, justice, and reclamation. As weeks passed, Elena rebuilt her life. She invested in herself, her career, and her passions. She surrounded herself with people who valued honesty, loyalty, and integrity. The weight of betrayal no longer lingered. It had been transformed into empowerment, wisdom, and freedom. In quiet moments, Elena would recall the day of revelation. She remembered the gasps, the whispers, and the stunned expressions as the evidence was laid bare. But more than that, she remembered the calm, focused determination that had carried her through. She realized that true power is not in retaliation, but in preparation, strategy, and unshakable composure. Her story became an inspiration. Friends, acquaintances, and even strangers marveled at her ability to turn a devastating betrayal into a story of strength and triumph. She had not only reclaimed her life, but had also set an example for anyone who had ever been underestimated, silenced, or deceived. Elena knew that life would continue with challenges, surprises, and opportunities. But now she was equipped with the tools, confidence, and clarity to face anything. Betrayal had revealed not just the weaknesses of others, but the incredible strength within herself. As she walked through the city streets one evening, the lights reflecting off the pavement, Elena felt an overwhelming sense of liberation. She had turned chaos into clarity, deception into evidence, and betrayal into empowerment. Her life was no longer defined by others' actions, but by her own resilience, intelligence, and courage. In the end, Elena had done more than expose betrayal. She had reclaimed herself. Her dignity remained intact, her power undeniable, and her spirit unbroken. And she knew with certainty that nothing and no one could take that from her.